Cricket et al. It's a website, it's a podcast.
Pete, it's a way of life. It's Gdeon over here.
And it's Peter Lawler over here.
And welcome to Cricket et al., your independent cricket podcast, coming to you in almost surreal circumstances from Perth Stadium at the moment. Perhaps we should explain to listeners exactly where we're sitting. So we're doing today's podcast from the scorer's box. We're back in the scorer's box. We've taken the plastic bag out of the garbage bin. We've got the laptop propped up there. We're busily watching Series 3 of the Test on the screens behind us. So we're actually watching ourselves commenting on. Actually, it's the Manchester.
That's Manchester now. Yeah.
2023.
I just saw
and Australia's getting smoked everywhere.
Again, all the time.
Yeah.
And I've just seen your handsome face up there, and I think mine was on. And our producer Dave is running off and hosting a pub trivia night back in Sydney while we're recording. So we can.
Hope it's going well. Let me know when you get up to geography. Okay. Oh, it's raining in Manchester. Looks like Australia's about to get off the hook.
Oh, dear.
Look, there I am again.
Oh, what a good
shaking my head.
Day 5.
Day 5. Remember day 5, Pete?
Oh, the umbrellas are up. Oh,
the misery.
The covers come out. Australia trailing by 61 runs. Only in Manchester.
Or
maybe Sydney.
Night.
Maybe Sydney. Yeah.
Certainly wasn't happening in Perth. Nothing was going to get Australia off the hook today.
Look. There's Jared Waitley.
Right.
No, you've got to
Let's put it to one side. That's the fourth wall. Let's leave the fourth wall intact.
Turn those screens off,
nothing was going to get Australia off the hook today. It was the fourth day, and the skies were clear. The pitch was flat, but India were all over us. It was just a negotiation of the margin of defeat, wasn't it? We've had plenty of days like this in Test cricket. It hasn't frequently been Australia on the receiving end of them. In the end, Australia has finished second. Well, actually finished third because Daylight finished second. They've lost by 295 runs, and that does not flatter Australia. And it's more than it's not even an adequate reflection of the difference between the two teams in this Test match. Really, India, from tee on the first day, had Australia under the cosh, didn't they, Pete?
Yeah, essentially, I think it was like you've been lapped once in the race, and then you were kind of, they're catching up again, and you forgot that they're already a lap behind. But look, I arrived full of pessimism about what would happen to Australia today, having watched 3 wickets fall in quick succession last night, knowing that Steve Smith was going to have to go out there against a very sharp new ball, against Bumrah. You know, if Smith goes early, this day could have been over by lunchtime. But look, I hate to sound like one of those coaches. There were a few positives for Australia today. Look at the look on your face.
Let's tick them off briefly, Pete.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Gosh.
All right.
God, that's distracting. Can you turn the TV off?
No, you can't. No,
bloody
it's inescapable. Just concentrate. Okay. Travis Head, 89. Batted
89. Okay, I thought he was really good.
Yeah.
Look, Steve Smith didn't make many runs, but he held them out. He held them out for 60 balls. You know, it was one of those innings that gave those that followed enough breathing space to come in and face a ball that wasn't a sharp edge on a pitch that hadn't just been pressed, and that sort of breathing space that Australia didn't get in the first innings. I mean, that innings, but that Travis Head and Mitchell Marsh's partnership was an excellent partnership. That started at a point in the game in the first innings where Australia was 7 wickets down.
Yeah,
you saw what India did was get through that tough early period, and then the going got good. But Australia didn't get through that early period in the first innings, and in not doing so, lost the match.
Yeah.
I know I sound a little bit like
Pollyanna-ish. Yes.
Have you read that? Have you?
I have.
Yeah. You are very cynical about my take on this one, Gideon. Hey, come on, give it to me straight. Give it to me with all your.
There's no masking the deficiencies in Australia relative to India in this Test match.
No.
And it was. I mean, look.
But that had been well established in the first 3 days of the match.
It had. But we are clutching at straws if we take too many positives out of today.
Well, hang on a minute. So if that had basically, I arrived here this morning thinking, if that goes the way it has been going, and there was every chance, like Travis Head has been under the pump. He hasn't made a run for ages. Yeah. Mitch Marsh had looked shocking and had been excoriated by you and many others for his efforts earlier in the game. If who else has been playing today? I need that scorecard. Even Smith, I thought, didn't look that abject. If all of those players had repeated what they'd done in the first innings, I don't know what Australia was going to do in Adelaide. I think at least now Australia can address perhaps one major problem before Adelaide and not a whole series of them.
Yeah.
And that one major problem is of whom we shall speak, Marnus lavish at some point.
Yeah.
But I think it can take some reasonable confidence from the performance of the others that you play them in Adelaide. And you could, and you didn't know that yesterday.
No, maybe not. But I mean, we haven't really resolved the Marnus question. I don't think that's going to be resolved before Adelaide. Certainly, Pat Cummins in his remarks at the end of the game gave no hint that his position was in jeopardy.
But they always say that, Gdeon. Have you ever heard anyone said, "Oh no, he's gone. He's not playing next test"? I don't remember anyone ever saying that at the end of the test match.
No.
Hey, by the way, Sue got up me last night about pointing the microphone like that, and she said that you hold the microphone like that, and it looks much better on YouTube.
Okay.
But now you're pointing it.
Oh, no. I'm not catching your bad habits.
Well, I don't know.
I'll put it down here. I just
you.
want people to see the Cricket et al. Logo on my T-shirt.
We're a bit like the Australian cricket team. You fix one problem and another one starts, There you go, Sue. I'm taking those hints.
Look, I think there's limited satisfaction and that we can take out of today, and I think the cricket was of limited consequence. The damage was already gone, and Australia was too far behind.
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, India probably didn't go as hard as they could. I thought Bumrah probably kept himself in cotton wool. He didn't bowl as much. He bowled a telling spell earlier on, and then came back to get head out. But otherwise, he left the heavy lifting to the rest of his attack. So he's thinking about the full scale of the 5-test series. I think India were pretty impressive. They were pretty organised in the field today. They were very, very purposeful. It was interesting, wasn't it, when they got Travis Head out? That was Australia's 6th wicket today. And the Indian celebrations, it was almost like by taking that wicket, they'd taken the World Cup. They were just, I've never seen a team so ecstatic about a wicket that was kind of a very, very limited consequence in the game. But they really want to win every trick, don't they?
I made exactly. Yeah, I was on radio at that point, and I made exactly the same observation.
Okay,
the joy that with which they celebrated that wicket, and the way Virat Kohli ran up.
I know, wasn't he great?
He actually looked like they'd won the series, didn't he? Yeah. There were the enthusiasm and exuberance of India. That competitiveness of them was still burning bright, wasn't it? They really wanted to get these blokes and. Yeah, it was notable. It was India's performance in this Test match has been outstanding, absolutely outstanding, and there's been so much cynicism about where they were at from people like me and from people who know better. When the game started, their selections were questioned, their form was questioned. They just lost 3 matches at home. I mean, most people had them down to lose this Test match and to lose this series. I think India reminded everybody that they're a very good team with great depth, and they love playing in Australia. And they just caught Australia with their pants down. It was a disastrous 3 days for Australia.
It's interesting. It's been a bit of a bait and switch from them because they bought out a team that we thought was a little bit long in the tooth. They've Rohit, Kohli, Jadeja, Ashwin. With a lot of we didn't use the expression "Dad's Army" because it's probably inappropriate in an Indian context. But they pulled the old switcheroo on us because they haven't played them. Rohit wasn't here, and they didn't pick either of the Ravis. And Kohli rolled back the years. And in fact, the average age of the Indian team, I think, is something like 26 or 27, compared to Australia in the early 30s. And I thought the gap was reflected in the relative kind of athleticism, and I thought dynamism of the two teams. I thought India were terrific in the field. I thought, as I said last night, India were terrific between wickets.
Yep.
I thought their bowlers looked super fit.
Australia didn't get a chance to be terrific between wickets.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is true. But they didn't look alert in the field. I thought they looked a little bit heavy, a little bit inert.
Yeah, they did. They did. And that can be a consequence of just a couple of characters in the field. If you've got a Travis Head and a Mitchell Marsh and an Usman Khawaja who are not athletic people, and probably aren't. Two of them at least probably aren't at peak fitness. Well, I'm not so sure about Travis.
From
Head,
time to
Mitch
time over the last few years, though, Australia has been very good at conjuring some brilliant fielding performance against the run of play that kind of brings them back into games. Marnus Labuschagne has been very good at doing that. He was, of course, during the World Cup last year in India, but. I mean, Marnus's diminishing contributions as batter and bowler, I think, were reflected in the field as well. He just wasn't a conspicuous presence. He wasn't outstanding. You look for Labuschagne in proximity to the ball, but he's not fielding in close to the bat. He didn't really have an impact in any respect in this game. It was almost possible to forget that he was playing.
Yeah, that's a fair point, isn't it? And you're right. Like, Australia had opportunities for run-outs that kind of can change the tone of a day to a degree. Pat Cummins missed side on, and we've seen Pat Cummins pull off some remarkable run-outs in the past. Travis Head missed a run-out almost as if he was aiming at the wrong end at one point, but, Usman Khawaja was back on his heels in the slips and didn't take a catch. Tell you,
Carey's conceded 22 byes.
He has conceded 22 byes, and India have two keepers, and that paid off here today when we saw Jarrell take that great catch without the gloves on. At bat pad, was he? Okay.
Yeah, and you did wonder actually whether there was an Australian who would have taken an equivalent catch. Certainly, it would have been surprising. It wasn't completely surprising in the context of the Indian performance.
But you don't just lose the ability to field.
No, you don't. But fielding, I think, is a bit of a reflection of the way in which a team is feeling about itself. Because, of course, fielding is the one part of the game that you don't get statistical recognition for. It's the thing that you're doing for everybody else, the thing that you're doing for a communal effort. I think the cohesion of a team is often reflected by the quality of its fielding. Yeah. Now, the best Australian teams have always looked fantastic in the field. This is not a great fielding team, and it's starting to show up.
I half expect David Warner to put his head through the door right now and say, well, because they're missing me. And it would be a reasonable point.
Yeah.
David Warner was, I'll lean on the cliche because I don't have any other words, the Energizer Bunny in the Australian fielding outfit, wasn't he? The guy who just chased the ball, who was up and about the whole time. You never saw Warner back off in the field. No. So maybe it is the absence of Warner, that spark in the field to some degree.
Yeah.
India is driven very much by the voice of Rishabh Pant to some degree.
Yes.
The attitude of Virat Kohli, that sort of ultra competitive edge that he brings in the field. Even though he performed so poorly in that first innings and we were writing eulogies for him, he never dropped dropped a sitter of a catch. He never dropped his head.
No,
he kept playing that team game. You didn't know that this was a guy struggling.
Yeah,
and it turned around for him gloriously with the bat. And India just have riches to burn, don't they? I mean, their greatest problem going into Adelaide is how they're going to fit all those players into an 11, which is not really, which is in stark contrast to Australia. You don't agree?
Sundar's bowled well here, but he hasn't made a definitive case to maintain his place for Adelaide. Depending on the pitch, they might include a second spinner.
But they've got two great spinners out in the nets.
And I'm guessing that Rohit comes in for Padikkal.
I guess so.
I mean, Australia would kill for India's problems.
They would. Yeah. But that wouldn't be very nice, would it, Gdeon?
No, it wouldn't. Marnus, do you want to talk about Marnus?
Not really. to you.
Yeah, it's almost like sort of making jokes at a funeral, isn't it?
My
He
voice
was awful in this game.
My voice is
Yeah.
hoarse from talking about Marnus in various media outlets.
I think he's got an identity crisis, and I think it reflects itself in this weird infatuation that he's got with bowling medium pace, because it's dreadful. It's absolute dross. It's embarrassing to see that bowl on a Test match field for Australia. I understand that he was kind of doing the donkey work yesterday because Cummins didn't want to burn his bowlers out, but really, he never looks like getting a wicket, and it just contributes to a general sense of sort of chaos in Australian ranks. And the batting is just weird. Because he went through this stage, didn't he, of trying to widen the scope of his game. He kind of experimented with shots. He was playing the ball wide. He was trying to show, how industrious he was. But he's shrunk back to this weird sort of strokeless, spineless wonder, hasn't he?
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen a batsman as completely not out of form, but just out of touch with what his natural game is. It's like he can't find his natural game, the natural gear into which his game falls. And I think Kohli was a very good example in this Test match of a guy who just sort of abandoned premeditation, stopped tinkering, and just went out and batted.
In the second innings, but not the first.
Exactly. Yeah. But Marnus can't just bat anymore. There's just too much going on upstairs. He's talking before the match about being the new Pujara. Well, what's wrong with being the old Marnus?
Yeah. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Yeah. And look, and to borrow the thoughts of Simon Kadich, he says, Marnus basically played negatively to 92% of the deliveries that he received in that first innings. He was out there for a long time. He didn't score any runs, mostly shouldering arms and getting bruised. And Pujara scored runs.
Yeah.
You want to be Pujara. Well, Pujara just didn't let the ball hit him on the body, a la Matthew Wade against New Zealand all those years ago. He remembered he had a bat and he used his bat. Andrew McDonald, I'd missed these quotes, but I saw them this morning, had said after the first innings, "You will see a different Marnus Labuschagne in the second innings. He will change his attitude. He's out there working in the nets. This is the great thing about Test match cricket. You get two bites at the cherry." It did not happen. In fact, if anything, It was kind of worse. I was talking to Brett Lee on the way in, and he was kind of making excuses for him, saying, Bumrah's really hard to pick. And I said, no. That situation, you've got to be pushing forward. You've got to be using your bat. Hey, you might get out, and you could be forgiven at least for making those shapes and getting out. But for making the shape that he made, which was a nothing, that's you have to be condemned for that, I'm afraid.
Well, that's a guy who's talked himself into, we're playing in Perth, the ball bounces a bit more, you can leave on length. I've got to be looking. My first recourse has got to be to leave the ball. But
he'd seen what happened to McSweeney a few overs before, and he knew that ball was darting through. I mean, the variance in height, unless he was in the dunny when McSweeney got out and didn't see what was going on, but that clearly didn't happen.
I think you picked it early on in the Test match, Pete. When,
Did I?
Do you remember in the first innings that Labuschagne came out, faced three balls, and called for a change of gloves?
That's right.
Remember that?
That's right.
He was just he was in a different world, wasn't he? He was sort of not completely present in his innings.
You should remind me of these things more often. I might have put that. I could have. That's why you're Gideon Haig.
I'm listening to you, Pete.
That's why you're Gideon Haig, and I'm just him. Yeah, I'm just Gideon Haig's batting partner. Yeah. Oh, is that enough about the Test match, Gideon?
What else could we talk about?
Well, I want to know how your WA day was yesterday.
Actually, look, we should go into a few interesting cameos of stuff that we've experienced at the Test match. Because, look, we're in a very privileged position here. We get to hang around with people who know a lot about the game and have a great time talking about it. It's a great little sort of ecosystem, a great little community gets created in the course of a Test match. Now, I'll tell you about a conversation I had this morning. So I bumped into Alan Border.
I love Alan Border.
Isn't he the best?
I have such a man crush on Alan Border.
So I got chatting to him about helmets. About his attitude to wearing a helmet early in his career, and he said, I didn't always wear a helmet. He said, some days I was stupid enough not to wear a helmet. I used to not occasionally not wear a helmet in county cricket when I played for Essex.
Because he's tough.
Yeah, I said, can you remember any occasions where you were a bit worried about getting filled in? He said, well, actually, I was playing a game for Essex and there was a guy called Tony Merrick. And I said, oh, yeah, Tony Merrick, he played, he was an Antiguan. He played, I think, for Warwickshire or something like that. He was one of those West Indian quicks, very slippery, but because West Indian cricket was so strong at the time, he never got a sniff of a test match. But he was quite tasty. And and Alan said that he was wearing a cap and he went for a hook shot and he got hit on the ear by Merrick.
Ow.
And of course, Alan being Alan, he batted on, got 100, won the game.
Oh, yeah.
So we're sitting there talking about this, and John Stevenson comes up. John Stevenson, who's the new CEO of the Wacker.
Oh, I thought it was that singer.
That's John Stevens.
Oh,
this is John
right.
Stevenson who played one Test match for England in 1989.
Yeah.
And I said, two old Essex teammates together. And John goes, yep, Alan Border taught me how to bat. And he said, and there was this one game, this guy called Tony Merrick. so Alan and I looked at each other and laughed. And went, what are the odds of Tony Merrick being mentioned twice in about 3 minutes? And not only that, but John said, I remember that day vividly because there was blood coming out of Alan's ear and he refused to go off. And at lunch, he actually put a bandage round his head, but there was still blood coming down the side of his neck. So, yeah. So I'm going to remember WA Day as Tony Merrick Day.
That's a wonderful story. I had a more sort of modest but similar thing this morning when Brad Haddon came in and was chatting to us, and he had shit on the liver over this, and he had shit on the liver over that, and suddenly he just finished talking, and in stormed David Warner, and he was angry too, and he says, "Hey, what about this?" And we went, Yeah, Hads just said that. He said, well, what about that? And Hads just said that. What he said down the store. No, I won't say what they were saying, but it's very funny, I reckon, because what we hear at the back of the box isn't what quite is always said at the front of the box by these guys. And the past players are much harsher critics of those who've inherited their roles than I think you sometimes expect them to be. I think it's like, probably how critical. No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to use that analogy. But it does surprise me how angry they can get about this mob out there and anything that they do differently. Yep. And I mean, we saw that. We saw that around that period with when JL was replaced and the veterans sort of climbed in there. But they go a lot harder than I do, and I think it's probably because they feel they have invested a lot into Australian cricket, and they want to see it respected the way that they respected it. And you talk. I mean, Simon Kadich is a man who says the same things on the microphone that he says at the back of the box. He tells it straight, and he's a guy who believes there is a way to play cricket and a way to respect the game, and nothing annoys them more than the thought that some of these guys aren't respecting the game as much as they did. I'm not always sure that they're correct in that assessment.
Well, of course, you've spent your lifetime defining yourself as a cricketer. Just because you stop playing doesn't mean that you cease to define yourself in that way. I mean, a lot of these guys, I think, still have one foot out in the middle. And, they still think in terms of cricket, and that is part of their value, isn't it? That the fact that they can project themselves into the middle of the contest and somehow intuit what a batsman or a bowler is thinking.
More than that, I think. I think it's that investment in Australian cricket. It means so much to them. I hate to be corny about this, but, it's that baggy green and test match cricket and how sacred it is and should be. So you didn't do anything on WA Day?
I tried to rewrite your piece, but you then rewrote it on me.
It's a bit like
anyway, it's come up very nicely. Pete's piece on Philip Hughes today. If you haven't read it already, you should certainly do so.
And without this sounding like a sort of
Yep.
Gideon's piece your piece really was an extraordinary piece of journalism. I mean, you're a bloody good writer at the best of the times, but you smashed that one out of the park. It was an outstanding read, and the world agrees with me. I look at the figures on that. Yeah, if you're watching this and you haven't looked at the Cricket et al. Website, grab a few cents or borrow some money from somebody just to read Gideon's piece, because it's worth the price of admission 10 times over.
Yeah, it was a funny moment when I bumped into Alan and Tom Morris was trying to explain to him what a Substack is.
I know, it's like Anne and Sandy here, the lovely ladies who are the scorers, and Lyle, who are the scorers in WA and have been here since I first came to WA.
Bless them.
And we're probably here, when my dad came to WA, and said, I bought the Australian on the weekend and I couldn't find your work. And I said, well, we've moved on. And she said,
Cool Kids.
We're on the internet. She said, oh, no, I don't do the internet. I don't do the internet. I said, well, you could print it out. That's kind of like reading it on the paper. She says, no, I don't do the internet thing. And
well, she's an analog person, being a scorer.
Like
quite understand.
They're great women. In fact, I just back in the old days when it used to get very stressful here. Well, it still gets bloody stressful here because of the time zones and the deadlines. I do remember some intemperate language being used by me on one day, and I was so ashamed. I came in the next day with some chocolate assorted biscuits for those scorers, and we've been the tightest of friends ever since. And it is one of the delights of cricket, just to come back 12 months later and go, oh, you're still here. It's great to catch up.
Yep.
Nothing on WA Day? Nothing. Oh, what other state has a day like WA
I'd never
Day?
heard of it before until I saw the signs.
No, I thought, and someone explained to me it's not WA Day.
Yeah.
I was wondering what WA Day was. But what about that drone show?
That was amazing, wasn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah, which we saw as we crossed the bridge last night. Actually, look, I mean, I've been critical of Perth Stadium over the years. Some people might remember, but I must say that every test match, every ground is richly improved by a bridge to walk over on the way to it. Don't you think? I love
a bridge. Oh, well, everyone loves a bridge.
Adelaide's got a bridge. Even Melbourne's kind of got a bridge.
Oh, it does have a bridge.
They got the little bridge at Jollymont Station. Yeah. It's every test match I try to walk to, if I possibly can. There's about a 35-minute walk into the Perth Stadium from where I'm staying, and
it'd be 20 minutes if I was walking with you.
Yeah, that's true. I'll get to walk past the East Perth Cemetery, which I think is a really interesting cemetery. Got to walk past Gloucester Park, as I mentioned the other day. Got to pay my respects to the Wacker, my favourite cricket ground in Australia. So, it's actually been lots of enriching experiences while we've been in town.
Yeah, I looked at the Jewish cemetery that's just up there on the hill. Yeah, it's this little plot just up there on the hill. Because we used to stay down there at the Siebel residences in east, south, west, north, or something Perth, and you walk up over the hill, and it's in a little allotment there. It's very old.
Yeah, right.
I think it's a Jewish cemetery. Okay. I might have to check my facts. Right. Maybe somebody could
something to do
check
tomorrow.
My facts. Yes,
got some time to on our hands.
I remember walking up that hill on a Saturday back in the day when we didn't have a Sunday newspaper on the Australian, so you could come in late. Yeah. And Ishant Sharma was bowling that spell to Ricky Ponting.
Oh, yeah.
And I was listening on the radio and approaching the ground and saying, I've got to get there to see this. Yep. This is something else. In my mind, I think that I did, but in reality, I don't think I did. I just have developed pictures of that contest and seen replays of it. It was a ripper, wasn't it? He was about 12.
We're sort of old enough to remember those pre-internet days, aren't we, where you did actually get a day off.
Back in the day, there was a thing. Nobody closed a laptop so emphatically as Malcolm Conn on a Friday night, and let everybody else in the press box know that he was having Saturday off, and you would not be seeing him.
Con man, we miss you.
Oh, we do miss Con man.
Yeah.
This is getting a bit long. It's a pity I never got to tell the stories about the great press box fights at the Wacker, of which there have been 3.
Oh yeah, Gazelle and Con Man.
Gazelle and Con Man over the can't bowl, can't throw one. When Gazelle dragged Con Man over the desk. there was the famous incident between Trevor Marshalsea and Peter Roebuck. When Peter Roebuck got so upset, he hurled a cup of coffee against the wall. I've got to tell you, this press box was very tiny. It had limited sort of view of the ground, and we're always under stress because of the deadlines.
It's a horrendous press box.
So, Roebuck's thrown the coffee against the wall because Trevor Marshalsea has edged in on there'd been a little bit of a turf war over who was going to be here or there, and poor old Justin Chadwick, who is still here now, who's been here ever since. Yeah. He was his first day ever covering the cricket, and he got covered in his laptop got covered in coffee.
Does this always happen?
And it was in his hair. I always said, he had dreadlocks up until this year. He's had dreadlocks for the last 15 years, because I always said he never washed that coffee out of his hair. And then there was the day where India's Sahi and Alex Brown had a similar turf war over, I need a bit more room on my left, I need a bit more room on my right. And I was sitting next to them here. And, it's like seeing two bull walruses pushing, and I could just seeing them topple over, and I'd be squashed, you'd see my entrails come out. So I actually picked up, and I went and took the worst seat in the press box for the rest of the test match, so that those two would not kill somebody in the vicinity should they that.
Good days.
Oh,
Good
there's
days.
some stories. There you go. People were asking for stories from Perth. We're still not going to get the story about that restaurant. We might hold that for later in the tour. No. That's way too bloody early.
Just needs some time to settle,
keep
doesn't
falling on my head. Just like push buttons, like us, do all that crap that people tell you on podcasts to do. Go to Cricket Out of Order, subscribe.
Do that.
Be kind.
Leave
be
messages. Kind. Get a T-shirt. They're fantastic.
Get a T-shirt. Join us over here in the new media. It's great fun.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's fun. Yeah.
And I think probably we need to let Dave get on with pub trivia.
Oh, well, yeah, that's right.
So we've overstayed our welcome. Thanks very much for your company over the last 4 days in Perth. Been fantastic to have you with us, and thank you for joining us on this journey with Cricket et al. And in the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And it's good night from him.